You're tuned in to the Andrew Lawton Show.
Everyone has turned 2020, I think, very deservedly into a punchline. It's been a very bad year in a lot of ways, but for people in media, the silver lining has been there's been no shortage of things to talk about. So for True North, it's been certainly a busy year, and I'd say a challenging year like it has been for everyone, but there's also been a lot that we have done. So I wanted to take this opportunity as we are nearing the end of the year here in the next day or so to chat with my friend and colleague, Candice Malcolm, who I will say, despite all of the, love and adoration I get from my viewers here, the one question I always get is, you're great, your show's great, but where's Candice been? So Candice, thanks for coming. Where have you been?
Well, first, Andrew, thank you so much. Merry Christmas. I hope you had a wonderful holiday, and same to
you too.
All of your viewers. So I've been sort of under the radar for the last few weeks. I had a baby in November, and so I've been taking the time to, spend time with my family and focus on the newborn and the family. So I've been away a little, but luckily we did a whole bunch of sort of pre-recorded content. So we released a documentary, we had the speaker series, we were doing a lot, and hopefully I'll be back, in no time at all in the new year to produce new content.
Well, I know everyone is very happy for you. I know certainly everyone on the True North team, myself included, is very much. But let's talk about how this year has been, because I remember at the very beginning of the pandemic when no one knew what was going on. We were seeing these terrible stories coming out of China and then Iran and then Italy. And you and I think with the whole team really said, okay, we need to be on the front lines of this. We know the mainstream media often gets things wrong. And we did, I remember the daily True North update shows. We were watching Justin Trudeau's daily press conferences so our viewers didn't have to, and talking about what was happening. It was interesting. When we first started doing that, I don't think you or I had any idea. I certainly didn't have any idea that would still be the story of the day 10 months later.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, it was just sort of one of those bizarre things where the narrative was constantly shifting, constantly changing. I remember at the very beginning of the pandemic when it was sort of more conservatives that were arguing in favor of wearing face masks. And so that was so that we wouldn't have to shut down the entire economy. The idea was like, if we just take a few precautions like social distancing and not wearing face masks, then we can keep the economy open and keep going. And now, because of the sort of changing message and the much more, I would say, draconian tone behind some of these demands, you see more and more conservatives opposing things like wearing face masks. But we've come a very long way, Andrew. And looking back at those early days, it was really frightening, really concerning. Watching the government sort of just go back and forth, contradicting itself, flip-flopping, changing its mind. It was sort of like a bizarro world, the idea which we lived through again during the U.S. federal election, where you had a liberal like Joe Biden saying that he would have done better than Trump did in shutting down the economy faster. Well, it doesn't take too much of a memory to look back and think, hey, it was January when Trump shut flights down from China. Trudeau refused to do that. And, it wasn't until 3 months later that Canada took any measures to lock down travel. So, we've had a crazy year in terms of the government messaging and the things that we've been told, the back and forth. I think trust in institutions like the government and like the media is at an all-time low, just from my perception. I don't know if there's any polling that backs that up, Andrew, but I think that really this idea that we need to trust experts when those experts are just constantly changing their mind is ridiculous. And I think that in that, it has created an opportunity for independent journalists like you and I at True North, because, we're not so obsessed with parroting the talking points and enforcing this idea that every expert must be correct and we must, turn off our minds and just listen to whatever the edict is of the day. Well, no, there still needs to be scrutiny. There still needs to be questioning. Just because someone's an expert doesn't necessarily mean that they know any better when it comes to, a mysterious virus from China. And I think a lot of people are just completely fed up and sick of these orders that we're getting without necessarily the evidence and the data backing it up.
There's a clip from the original Borat movie that I just remembered, and I haven't thought of that movie since it came out, 10 or 12 or however many years ago, when Borat is at the United Nations and he's just completely making a fool of himself, doing things that make no sense, and they keep cutting to the expert panel on TV where people who pretend to know exactly what he's doing talk about, why he's doing this is because this, and why he's doing this. And there's been a lot of that in the pandemic where we are all in unprecedented territory. No one knew what we were dealing with. No one knew the implications of it. But you take people that are paid to have an opinion, they're paid to say things. And I say this knowing full well what I do for a living, but I don't pretend to have the answers if I don't. And that's the problem that we have. And this was something that True North started looking at long before COVID came along, which was the sort of expert industrial complex. But this year, I really think that the circumstances have established why it's so dangerous to really cede everything to rule by experts.
Absolutely, Andrew. And there's just some questions that beg being asked. I mean, when the virus first came out, the epicenter was a basically unknown large industrial city in China called Wuhan. No one had really ever heard of Wuhan before. It was hardly ever mentioned in the media. One of the interesting things about Wuhan is it is the home to China's biological warfare labs. And I remember raising that question just sort of, kind of almost not casually, but just without having a lot of evidence connecting it, but just saying, hey, look, this is the center of China's biological labs. Why isn't that being dug into? Why isn't that being questioned? And merely just for raising that question and making that observation, I started getting, hit pieces written about me and people calling me a conspiracy theorist and sort of having this backlash against me just for asking the question. And, last time I checked, the role of a journalist is to ask questions, sometimes uncomfortable questions. And sometimes the questions that you ask don't lead anywhere, and sometimes they do. But the idea that you shouldn't be able to ask certain questions, it just seems so out of line to me. And I think that again, really it has been center in this entire COVID pandemic, all the government lockdowns, is that, we're not really supposed to question the orders that are coming down. And yet, Andrew, as you know, sometimes they just make such little sense. And when you have so much on the line, a small business owner, a restaurant owner, anybody who earns their living by going out into the world, and government's taking that livelihood away from them, it's incredibly serious, and it deserves pushback and scrutiny. I think one of the most disappointing things that's happened this year, and Justin Trudeau's been awful, but we expect that at this point. I've been really disappointed in Doug Ford and the sort of hysterical tone that has been taken. I mean, the biggest story right now, and I know you've been talking about it on your show, is with the minister, Rod Phillips, being down in St. Bart's. And the reaction to that from Doug Ford himself has been so over the top. I mean, yes, obviously it's a contradiction when a politician is traveling after telling you and I not to travel. But if the government was really serious about a rule that we're not allowed to travel, why haven't they shut down the airports? Why are there still flights going in and out of Pearson, Toronto daily? I mean, I'm down in the Bahamas right now. I've been down here for some time. And I know there's daily flights that are coming in and out. So if the government truly does believe it's beyond the pale and terrible to get on an airplane and travel, why haven't they shut down the flights? Why haven't they shut down the airports? It doesn't make any sense. So, we're in a situation where you're allowed to travel. It's not against the law. There are flights going in and out. And yet somehow when you do it, it's this horrible offense. I don't understand.
Yeah, and this was the point I raised earlier in the show, which is that I'm very much pro-travel, but I'm anti-hypocrisy. And when you have the government on one hand saying, don't go anywhere, make it the year of the Ontario staycation, and then on the other hand, buggering off to St. Bart's and then not wanting to disclose where he was or when he was coming back and that sort of stuff. I'm very much on team, let's try to live our lives. And the reality is the politicians who keep talking about how dangerous things are in Canada right now now, they shouldn't blame people that are going to vacation destinations that in many cases have fewer cases than exist in Ontario. So, I mean, that's the other irony of this, is that if someone is not breaking the law, they've made a decision, they're comfortable with the risk, which always exists when you travel, then I would say have at it. But this year, you are bang on that we are not supposed to ask the questions this year, whether it was Patty Hajdu telling people that they were feeding conspiracies if they asked about China's numbers, people calling you a conspiracy theorist for talking about, or asking about rather, the biology lab, and even with politicians' conduct. I mean, this idea that politicians have put forward is that we're all supposed to be a united front, which sure may well be true, but that doesn't mean that you have to accept without scrutiny and without skepticism guidance from people that have demonstrably been getting it wrong.
Well, and Patty Hajdu is another example of someone who also was traveling all over the place. True North broke a story of how
and
many
the media
flights.
Outrage nowhere nearly as strong as it was on her.
Right, and same with when she was caught in an airport not wearing a mask. Well, supposedly there was a bag somewhere that was full of food, and so she was exempt from that rule. But when it was happening to Andrew Scheer, there was no such exemption. And look, yeah, for my case, one of the reasons that we decided to come down to the Bahamas was to get away from Ontario and the crazy governance up there, the hospitals that are full, the mismanagement. Like I said, I had a baby, and my experiences going to the doctor's offices and the hospitals in Toronto were pretty outrageous, just given how slow everything was, how much they made you wait, how long everything took, how kind of quickly they'd rush you in and out of services. The whole idea behind having a universal healthcare system is so that supposedly everyone gets good care, but it really felt like they were skimping out and not giving the care that I needed and that I demand. One of the other things is that being locked down in a cold climate isn't very fun, especially with little kids. So I think it's a great idea to go somewhere where you can be outside, where you can get fresh air, you can get vitamin D. And then as far as the whole government approach, I just think it's truly outrageous, the idea that we're supposed to just say yes to everything and go along without question, especially, Andrew, when there's such a strong ideological component behind it. And I'm talking about Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland and the whole green reset, bragging about the idea that this is an opportunity to somehow, change our economy and move away from the driving forces of our economy, which are our energy and fossil fuel. There is an ideological component. They're trying to, do whatever they said, a great reset, to produce some kind of a green utopian economy, which is totally ridiculous and unfeasible, as anyone who's looked into some of the technologies that they're talking about knows, and we focused on that very thoroughly in the Green Hypocrisy documentary series, Andrew. But of course Canadians should question, and of course Canadians should push back against the rhetoric and against often really, really contradictory, hypocritical positions that the government has been forcing upon us.
Yeah, and I do think the Green Hypocrisy documentary is great for two reasons. Well, for many reasons, but two chiefly right now. One of them is that it was putting a lot of these issues into a greater perspective in a way that I even think an environmentalist would appreciate. If you're someone that cares about the environment, you care about climate, you might not agree with everything that was in that series, but you would very much agree that what government's doing isn't really dealing with the problems they say they're dealing with. And the other part is that for us, this year had its challenges. I know True North had a lot of projects that we wanted to do. I personally did that we just couldn't do this year because of the pandemic and travel restrictions and other things. So it was really great for us to be able to produce a big, significant project like that really resonated with people.
Yeah, well, thank you, Andrew. I know we did have other plans, and they included, we were supposed to do an entire cross-Canada tour. You and I were going to be traveling. We had Douglas Murray, the British author and thinker. He had already had his flights booked, and we had this whole thing planned. And of course, we had to postpone that, potentially cancel that because of COVID and the restrictions and the uncertainty of it all. But I think that we still had a very strong year. I think that to me, that the big things that stuck out were, the launching of the Independent Press Gallery, which you were a large part of, our inaugural event, which was supposed to be a debate among all the conservative candidates. And, we sort of dealt with the circumstances. You were on the ground last minute and turned that into really a wonderful fireside chat event. And that was really the highlight of the year, Andrew. And I give you all the kudos in the world for that. But we did a lot of other things. I think that the speaker series was really fun. I did a lot of really, really compelling interviews. I sat down with Rex Murphy, Pierre Poilievre, Conrad Black, Barbara Kay, Dave Rubin. There was a lot of really big names, Douglas Murray. I thought that was great. Maxime Bernier as well. We did a good interview, and then the Green Hypocrisy. And I think that it shows, how we were able to sort of pivot, how we were able to, change what we were focused on, because the idea of doing live events wasn't possible. So we started doing a lot more interviews, a lot more Zoom events, testing out the different technologies. And I think we found some successes that we're going to carry on into the new year.
Yeah, very much so. And I appreciate the kind words about the fireside chat. I don't know if I would relive that day again, but it was still, in the end, one that we can be very happy and very proud of. And even in general, the conservative leadership race, I think, is a point of pride, because so often these things are covered through the mainstream media's lens and really in mainstream media terms and context. And for us to actually provide a conservative, small c conservative approach to the issues at stake in the leadership was something that was just completely absent from that race. And I mean, you and I have joked about it in the past, that live stream that we did of the results show that was supposed to be, I think it was, supposed to be 45 minutes and ended up being over 8 hours. Again, another day that I wouldn't relive, but we can still be proud of. So there was a lot of room for the perspective that we bring and the analysis that we bring. What do you want to do with that in 2021?
Well, I think that we're going to build off the successes that we've had. You give a great example with the leadership race. I think a lot of Canadians just discovered True North and realized, oh, wow, I don't have to watch the party that I vote for, the party that I care about, through the lens of the CBC, where they demonize everything and they make it seem controversial just to hold very basic conservative values or Christian values or family values. So we provided that alternative. And again, just growing off of that, I know we have a lot more sort of hard-hitting interviews, other documentary series. We're looking to expand. We've still got our investigative journalism team. We're digging out new stories, putting pressure on politicians in Ottawa in ways that the mainstream media just doesn't. The Parliamentary Press Gallery, we're sort of challenging them. I mean, the idea that they have complete reign over Ottawa and that no one else has any right to ask questions. We're challenging that, not just through True North, but also through the Independent Press Gallery. The idea that journalists can get accredited without being part of that establishment media, that sort of dying breed of big corporations running these media companies. I think we saw a bit of a preview, Andrew, of what's possible during the U.S. election, where big high-paid journalists on CNN didn't have the influence that they used to. You saw the rise of a lot of independent journalists, a lot of independent outlets outshining the mainstream media. More people get their news from Joe Rogan and his podcast on Spotify, or Ben Shapiro and his Daily Wire show on YouTube than do watch the mainstream media. And I think that same thing is possible in Canada, and we're carving the path towards that. So I think we've got a lot of really exciting projects and ideas and a lot of momentum that we're going to carry on into 2021.
Yeah, very much so. And a lot of the things that I wanted to do in 2020, I haven't forgotten about. We just had to move them back. So maybe I'll have twice as much on my plate this year. Who knows? But you know what? It's all fun stuff, and I love doing it. And I'm so grateful still that you founded True North and continue to see this organization through all of the different turns and pitfalls and highs and lows of 2020 and beyond. So Candice, thank you very much. Congratulations again on the lovely new baby. And thank you for coming on and giving us an update on what's happening for you and for the organization.
Well, thank you so much. I think family is just so important, and I'm enjoying every moment of staying home with my baby and focusing on that right now. But I haven't forgotten about True North, Andrew, and I just want to quickly say to the viewers, it was a really uncertain year. There was really a lot of people losing their job, losing their livelihood, and we didn't really know what was going to happen with True North. We paused all of our donation attempts. We stopped fundraising because we just didn't feel right asking people for money. We instead encouraged everyone to donate to their local food bank. We even created a map for Canadians to find their closest food bank so that they could go and volunteer and donate and help. And I was just sort of floored. Once the economy sort of started to open back up again in the summer, we started doing our donation pitches again. And I was just floored by the support and generosity of our viewers, of our fans out there, because, really they're the ones that keep us going, Andrew. And it was like they appreciated what we were doing more than ever. And we actually saw increases in the amount of money that we were making, which helped us, hire new journalists and do new projects. So I really just want to say thank you so much to everyone watching, everyone who supports our work and helps keep independent journalists and journalism alive in Canada. It's so needed. It's so important. And again, we've got a lot more in store for the new year. And Andrew, I know, when I'm away, you're doing a lot more. You're covering a lot of the editing and the overseeing the team and the work and everything. So thank you so much for the work that you do. You're really, really a core part of True North. We would never have the success that we did without all your work. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for that.
Well, thank you. And I certainly echo that gratitude to the viewers. Thanks very much, Candice, and Happy New Year to you and the family.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.